What's up, everybody? Jon TheMorgile here, checking in for a Flat Earth video for you guys. Hope you enjoy it today. Today I'm just going to go through some comments and respond to them because I, breezed through them and found some interesting stuff that I wanted to reply to, and hopefully it makes for a good show. So, starting with Stephen Kresoha, if I'm saying that right, he says, "Wow, the truth really seems to be growing. If it's a globe, it should be very easy to prove. The proof should not be me or anyone else taking someone else's word for the proof because a scientist says so. You see, once you've been caught lying, you cannot be trusted anymore. I don't care how many people are fooled by the BS. When it's BS, it's BS, so wake up. We're on a plane, not a planet. We live on a physical plane, a physical dimension. You've heard of interdimensional beings, right? These are your aliens that come from different planets. They're different planes of existence. We're on the physical plane. They are in a totally different plane, and they can manifest here on our plane. They don't come from outer space. They come from right around here." So I think that's an interesting point because, in the heliocentric model, the idea of extraterrestrials coming from some other solar system or some other galaxy even is slim to none. Like, first they'd have to find us, and then they'd have to overcome the challenges of traveling light years through infinite space. And, if there's hypothetically life forms out in space, certainly they wouldn't live for millions of years, which hypothetically that's how long it would take to travel a single light year, right? I mean, unless they're traveling at close to the speed of light. But besides the point, they would first have to find us in the infinite void of space. Then they'd have to get here. And, the fact of the matter is, the standard, typical alien, as it were, is humanoid, right? It's got 2 arms, 2 legs, 2 eyes, a nose, a mouth, walks upright. And so the idea that that is coming from some other planet in outer space is absurd. Taking a page from standard, accepted, hypothetical science, you and I would have genetically more in common with a garden tomato than we would with, say, an alien from some other world. So the popular stereotype of an alien is a humanoid or whatever. And so, the notion that they're coming from some distant galaxy or distant solar system is absurd. And so if what people are saying is true about these aliens, I've never seen one, so this isn't coming from me. This is coming from, popular culture. But if what they're saying is true and these aliens are humanoids, to me that is really good proof that they are local. Maybe they're extraterrestrial in the sense that they come from beyond our known realm, which is defined by, the visible path of the sun. So wherever the sun is visible from, that is our realm. Perhaps there are other quote-unquote solar systems somewhere off, removed from our realm, and, maybe these entities, these so-called aliens, are coming from there. Now, when you read into things like, for example, the Iron Republic, which was from the early 1900s, describing a late 1800s voyage to the far south, where the author of the book purportedly, well, really it was a series of installments in Florida Magazine. I've got the thing in audiobook format on my channel. I'll put a card right here. According to that, they took a sailing vessel to the far south and found an opening in like a pass through the Antarctic, and essentially came out the other side, and there were lots of other continents that were inhabited by basically an offshoot from the British civilization or from the European civilization that was currently in the process of colonizing the Americas. So according to that, there is more land out there. And, this is a perfect motivation for the powers which ought not be to deceive us about the shape of the world. Because, of course, if we live on a finite enclosed ball, it doesn't matter how far south you go, you're just going to come back out at the other end, right? Up in the other side of the world, on the anti-meridian of where you started. And so there's also a motive in terms of creating the illusion of scarcity, which is something that the stock market riggers and the powers which ought not be are famous for, is futures markets manipulation. And by creating this illusion of scarcity, they're able to drive up prices on their commodities. So sort of insider trading motivation there. And, you know, greed is a big motivator as any, right? And so this idea of extraterrestrials coming from lands that are beyond our realm, you know, beyond where the sun shines, makes a lot of sense in flat Earth. However, in the heliocentric ball Earth theory, it makes no sense at all for a number of reasons that I've listed. So that's a very interesting point. And, you know, a lot of people seem to think that flat Earth is somehow mutually exclusive to extraterrestrials, and I tend to believe the very opposite is true. It seems to me that the heliocentric infinite space theory is mutually exclusive to aliens, extraterrestrials coming from some other world, finding us, solving all the problems, reaching us, getting here, and then communicating to us with crop circles, right? I mean, it doesn't make a lot of sense. And so the idea that they're just skipping over the Antarctic and they've, you know, figured out a way to travel here. Maybe they don't have tyrannical governments that keep them bottled in with deception onto their little planet, as it were. It makes a lot of sense. And so, you know, that's an interesting point. Thanks for the comment, Stephen. VT says he's talking about Juicy Smollett. And this is that guy from the Empire show. He's apparently, well, he was mugged in a hate crime or beat up in a hate crime. These guys allegedly poured bleach all over him and beat him up and stuff. But the two guys that allegedly did this are now coming forward saying, well, he planned it. This guy, Smollett or whatever, planned it. He orchestrated the whole thing. For what reason, I don't know. But the fact that they're coming forward and saying, yeah, we know this guy, he orchestrated this whole thing, it does ring true to me. And, you know, I'm no expert on this topic or anything, but, like, that's a pretty bizarre defense, okay? And so for someone to come up with a defense like that, it must have rang true with the, I guess, Chicago Police Department, because they apparently changed the trajectory of their investigation, and now they're looking into Juicy Smollett himself as sort of the mastermind of his own, you know, hate crime. And so what is his motivation for that? Why would he do that? For publicity, you know, to get his name out, make himself a household name, I suppose. That makes some degree of sense to me. But Lily, she lost a tooth today. Her little incisor on the bottom is gone. Poor baby. So there's the star of the show right here. Little Lily. Okay, so yeah, there's the Juicy Smollett comment. Thanks, VT. The Flat You Later says, the flat Earth is unable to explain or predict eclipses at all. Problem with what you've said in this video is your two-dimensional thinking in a three-dimensional reality. There's no reason why a shadow cannot appear over the pole regions at all. Simple-minded people will believe what you are demonstrating here because it's two-dimensional and far from reality. Well, Flat You Later, I love how you make the claim that there's no reason why a shadow cannot appear over the pole regions at all, yet you provide no evidence to support that claim. So basically what you've done here is make an unsubstantiated claim. You've done nothing to actually combat the point that I've made or to refute the point that I've made. You're just basically using ad hominem attacks, which is run-of-the-mill for globe earthers, insulting my intelligence, saying that I'm not thinking outside of the box enough. But in fact, two-dimensional thinking is enough in this instance, because you really don't have to get into the third dimension in this instance, because according to the ball Earth theory, when you've got a solar eclipse, you have an alignment between the sun, the moon, and the Earth on the ecliptic plane. So there's one plane of action going on here, okay, the ecliptic plane. So in the sense that we're dealing with one single plane of action in this problem, two dimensions, okay, it is a two-dimensional thing. And so maybe I can bring up a graphic here, but when you have this alignment between again, we're humoring the heliocentric theory, which is something that I wish the ball earthers would do more in terms of humoring the flat earth reality, but that's just out of the question, right? The only thing we're supposed to think about is the ball earth theory. But when you have that alignment on the ecliptic plane, the position of the moon's shadow cast upon the Earth in that example, or in a total solar eclipse, the position of that shadow is going to be dictated by the alleged tilt of the Earth, depending on the season. So if you're in the northern summer, then the shadow of the moon upon the ecliptic plane should fall somewhere around the Tropic of Cancer. Conversely, in the southern solstice, the shadow of the moon should fall somewhere upon the Tropic of Capricorn. And when you're closer to the equinox, the shadow of the moon should fall really close to the equator. And then, you know, the only variance you would have would be as if you have a total solar eclipse somewhere in between, right? Either the northern or southern solstice, or around the equinox, or anything in between that, okay? But the fact of the matter is, we have scientific data of the shadow of the moon traversing the polar regions during solar eclipses. Now, this is geometrically not possible. Now, you saying that it is possible proves nothing. Okay, try to model this out, diagram this out. You have one plane of action where these three hypothetical balls are aligned, and that is the ecliptic plane. And again, the ecliptic plane would be the plane of orbit of the Earth. So it's relative to the Earth and the Sun. The Earth goes around the Sun along the ecliptic plane in the ball Earth theory.
And of course, it's worth mentioning that the moon allegedly orbits the Earth along the ecliptic plane, more or less. Supposedly 5 degrees offset from the ecliptic plane, which is not going to amount to much. It's certainly not when we're talking about the shadow of the moon traversing the polar regions. Okay, so more or less the moon, the Earth, and the Sun are along the ecliptic plane in this solar eclipse scenario.
And so when you have a solar eclipse, you have an alignment of the Sun, Moon, and Earth along the ecliptic plane. Again, 2 dimensions is good enough for this example. And the fact of the matter is, we often see the signature of solar eclipses going over the polar regions. Okay, it is not possible in the ball Earth theory. Okay, furthermore, big problems with eclipses. The fact that the shadow of the moon itself is usually 60 or 70 miles in diameter, the actual shadow of the moon hitting the Earth. Now, this is the one time in reality where hypothetical physics meets the ground, and we can actually measure something here in reality as opposed to pondering the stars and pondering the heavenly luminaries. Okay? Now, if you can take a 1,000-mile diameter object, as the moon is purported to be by ball earthers, and taking a single light source, the sun, casting a shadow from that 1,000-mile diameter object that is 50 or 60 miles in diameter, sometimes as little as 2 miles in diameter, that simply is not possible. With light and shadow, you will always have the shadow of the obstructing object as being at least the size of the cross-section of that object. So if you're dealing with a sphere, the cross-section is always going to be the same. It's going to be uniform no matter which angle you're lighting it from. And so if you've got a 1,000-mile diameter object, or okay, let's scale this down and say a 1-foot diameter object, try and cast a shadow with, say, a basketball that's an inch in diameter, okay? And I'll tell you, I'll save you some time, you can't do it, okay? Because if you take a single light source and cast a shadow with a basketball, the shadow of that basketball is always going to be at least the diameter of the basketball, or larger. So shadows certainly do expand with distance from the obstructing object, but certainly nowhere in reality, just using a simple object and a single light source, can you cast a shadow that diminishes in angular size proportionally with distance from the obstructing object. So the fact of the matter is, when we have solar eclipses, again, the one time in nature when we can measure something that is going on in the heavens, we find data that is categorically incompatible with the ball Earth theory. And so what that means is that the moon absolutely cannot be a 1,000-mile diameter object, you know, some 250,000 miles away. It's not possible. Now, you couple that with the fact of the matter in eclipses that we often see the eclipse signature or the shadow of the moon being cast in polar regions when the moon and the sun and the earth are supposedly aligned on the ecliptic plane. So what you're saying is that the earth is tilted 90 degrees towards the ecliptic plane? That doesn't make any sense at all. You're not thinking this through. you're just arguing against me because you think I'm some stupid, retarded flat earther, when in fact the person who is misinformed and hasn't thought this through is you, yourself, Mr. The Flat You Later. Very funny name, though. And, you know, I should mention that the final thing, not the final thing, but another thing that's wrong with eclipses is the fact that, okay, so granting you for argument's sake that a 1,000-mile diameter object can somehow cast a shadow that is a couple miles in diameter, which is absurd, but granting that for argument's sake, the only way that that's possible is allegedly due to the umbra-penumbra phenomenon of the sunlight. So according to you, the sun's light is traveling through space, converging upon itself at some point in space prior to hitting the moon, thus diverging from itself and casting this sort of pinpointer, conical, inverted, bizarre, peculiar shadow that cannot be demonstrated in reality. But that's what's allegedly going on. You have this convergence and divergence of the sunlight before it hits the moon, casting this peculiar shadow. Now, the problem with that is, if you remember, you guys say that everyone's known the Earth is a ball for 2,000 years, and, you know, the ancient Greek Eratosthenes measured the radius of the Earth using triangulation on the sun from Alexandria and Syene, you know, the stick in the well experiment. In order for his measurement to work, you have to have the sunlight coming in at parallel angles to one another. So which is it? Is the sunlight coming in at convergent and thus divergent angles to one another, thus casting the very peculiar pinpointer stylish shadow of the moon? Or is Eratosthenes correct? Is the sunlight coming in at parallel angles to one another in order to, you know, get the triangulation data, the trigonometry data that you need to glean the radius of about 3926 miles? Okay, so that's a big, you know, there's just all sorts of problems with eclipses and all sorts of problems with ball earthers who somehow believe that making an unsubstantiated claim is going to change my mind about something that I've really spent a lot of time looking into, presented this to the world, and come to find people that just ignore everything I say, make unsubstantiated claims, ad hominem attacks, and for a lot of people that's good enough. For me, that dog just ain't gonna hunt, bud. So anyways, thanks for the comment, Flat You Later. Lyons Phillip says, even the Bible implies that the world is flat, when in the Revelations it describes the angels being sent out to the four corners of the earth on several instances. So a sphere, as we all know, doesn't have four ends on the earth. So, and you know, I tend not to delve into biblical arguments either for or against flat earth, because in my opinion, the Bible was not written in a context where this was even debated. Okay, the Bible was written in a time when everyone knew that the earth was flat and stationary. If you were to tell someone that you thought the earth was a spinning ball back then in the, you know, the biblical era, they'd laugh you out of the room. They might even stone you to death. I don't know. But the thing is, the Bible was not written in a context in order to prove or disprove the ball earth theory or the flat earth theory. Now, clearly, the Bible is indeed a flat earth book, and that may speak volumes to you if you're indeed a Christian. On the other hand, if you're an atheist, or if you're, you know, not into ancient religions, because, well, really all ancient religions and all ancient cultures knew the earth was flat. But if you're an atheist per se, and someone starts bringing biblical arguments to the table, it's not going to score any points for you at all. In fact, it may lose points for you because, you know, again, if you're an atheist, you're not going to believe anything that's in the Bible anyway. So it just makes flat earthers appear to be dogmatic believers in theory, or dogmatic believers in the biblical proclamation, when in fact, you know, me personally, I became a flat earther really long before I even realized the significance that this had on my faith as a Christian. Okay, because I was raised in the Christian church, in a Greek Orthodox church. I was an altar boy for over a decade, and I made the conscious decision when I was much younger to disregard the Bible, in fact, because the Bible, like, look at the very first book in the Bible, in Genesis, it clearly says that the earth is made fixed and immovable. Okay, so if the Bible says that the earth is fixed and immovable, Yet science says that the Earth is a spinning ball flying around in 5 different directions at once along curved linear paths at millions of miles an hour, ultimately, with the galactic frame of reference. That is pretty much the opposite of fixed and immovable. And so I did, as a young Christian, made the conscious decision that Christianity and really all religions are ridiculous, retarded, and not worth our time, although I was forced to continue attending church as a youngster. However, now that I'm in my mid-30s or late 30s now, but introducing myself to Flat Earth, it really does make us go back and revisit Christianity as a viable thing, because in fact, the Bible was right all along. Genesis was right. The Earth is, in fact, fixed and immovable. And, you know, if the Earth were spinning around 1,000 miles an hour at the equator, orbiting the sun at 66,600 miles an hour, orbiting the galaxy at 500,000 miles an hour, flying through the cosmos with the galactic frame of reference at some millions of miles an hour, there would be plenty of evidence for that, okay? Because, again, orbital paths are allegedly curvilinear, which means there should necessarily be angular acceleration built in to this motion, okay? So if you travel at a consistent speed along a curved path, you're going to experience constant acceleration. It's a physical law of nature, yet we're supposed to disregard that physical law of nature because it suits the globe Earth theory. Just like everything else. Just like the shadow of the moon being 50 miles in diameter usually. Just like the shadow of the moon during an eclipse being cast upon the polar regions, which is not possible if the Earth, the Sun, and the Moon are aligned to the ecliptic plane, and the Earth only tilts up to 23.4 degrees. Okay? So, ignorance is not a virtue replied to Lyons Phillips' comment. That's why we don't use the Bible as a science book. And I gotta say, I do agree with that sentiment. The Bible is not a science book. Now, if you're a Christian, Flat Earth is a huge affirmation for your faith, and I think it even does bring non-Christians and atheists and even nihilists to spirituality or to Christianity. But you're not going to initially score any points with a person who's an atheist and, you know, not interested in that sort of thing by using biblical arguments. But, you know, in my comment section, you're free to state whatever you want. So I appreciate Lyons Phillips' comment. I appreciate ignorance is not a virtue's comment as well. But Lyons Phillip replies to ignorance is not a virtue. He says, science has to be corrected over and over repeatedly or not, which is true. Case in point, up until the early 1900s, it was purported by science that people were not meant to fly, else God would have given us wings, right? So aviation was never going to happen according to the scientific community. And in fact, in the early 1900s, the Wright brothers proved all that wrong and had the first sustained piloted flight, flying in the face of the scientific consensus of their time. Okay, and so, yes, science was corrected after that, was it not? So that's true. Now, ignorance is not a virtue, comes back and says, it's called not pretending you know everything about the universe from the get-go simply because of some religious myth. I gotta say, the people that are pretending to know everything about the universe are the ball earthers, okay? It's not the flat earthers that are pretending to know everything. It is, in fact, the ball earthers. And yes, science is revised repeatedly throughout history because, you know, scientific advances in our understanding will change the, you know, change the trajectory of science in general. So thanks for the comments, Lyons Phillip, and ignorance is not a virtue. So retired Rhinestone, retired RC Cowgirl says, National Geographic, time to change your name to New World Order Graphic. So true indeed. Angel Satchi says, why do you flat earthers believe that you could feel that the earth is stationary? I mean, that's just like waking up in a smoothly flying plane and concluding that the plane doesn't move. We humans can only feel acceleration, and because the earth isn't accelerating but moving at the same pace, we don't feel anything. Also, the Van Allen belts of radiation are of little risk to humans. The danger of the Van Allen belt is that the main computer and guidance system of the Orion capsule could be damaged, making it impossible to navigate and stranding the astronauts in space. The Apollo capsules of the 1960s and 70s had only very sparse computer equipment, which was prone to radiation damage by its simplicity and massive design. Well, you made a couple of points here that the Earth isn't accelerating, and that is just absolute nonsense. You have no idea what you're talking about. First of all, the rate of speed of the Earth is not supposedly consistent. The Earth is allegedly accelerating and decelerating depending on what point in its orbit it is. They don't claim that the Earth goes in a perfectly circular orbit. It's an offset elliptical orbit, allegedly. And so you have the aphelion and perihelion of the orbit, meaning at certain points the Earth will be going at a much sharper, smaller radius curve, and at other points it will be going along a much larger radius curve. So it's an offset ellipse. So, but during these times, the Earth is allegedly accelerating and decelerating in actual speed. But furthermore, let's just forget that for a second. Let's forget that acceleration and deceleration for a moment. And let's just remember that if you are traveling along a curved path, you're going to experience angular acceleration, which is manifest in reality as centrifugal force. That is a measurable thing that always occurs with centrifuges. Okay? And furthermore, let's not forget that as the Earth is allegedly spinning 1,000 miles an hour along a curve, no less, we should experience that as an acceleration. But in the morning, and as the sun's coming up, and you're standing, right at the point where, you're at the twilight zone of the Earth, in that twilight zone, as the sun comes up, the Earth should be racing up towards your feet, up this way, towards your feet, at over 60,000 miles an hour. 12 hours later, as you travel along the great curve of the Earth, at sunset, during that twilight zone, the Earth should be traveling down that way, down away from your feet at over 60,000 miles an hour, a total acceleration over 12 hours of over 130,000 miles an hour. So for you to say that there is no acceleration with the spinning ball Earth is absurd. It shows that you have not thought about this at all. You're just regurgitating what you've been led to believe. The fact of the matter is, you use the analogy of waking up on a plane and proclaiming that the plane is stationary because you don't feel it accelerating. Well, what if that plane was constantly spinning on its axis, doing a barrel roll constantly, and flying along a curved path? Do you think you would notice that acceleration? Even though the plane's going consistently 500 miles an hour, it's barrel rolling the entire time, and it's going along a curved path the entire time. That would have necessary built-in angular acceleration, which again would manifest itself as measurable and observable to us. Furthermore, let's just forget all the barrel rolling and curved linear path of this hypothetical plane that we're on. If you're on a plane that's going 500 miles an hour consistently without hitting any turbulence, sure, as long as you're sitting in your chair and not moving, that's a fixed frame of reference. But the instant that you run to the rear of the plane and time yourself, and then run to the front of the moving plane and time yourself, you'll find that it is indeed easier to run towards the rear of the moving plane, because a moving object can only be considered as a fixed frame of reference so long as you, as the secondary body in that equation, are not accelerating yourself. Okay, so running towards the rear of a moving plane versus running towards the front of a moving plane, that difference conclusively proves, and anybody can do this experiment, it's really not even worth doing, but that difference proves that the Earth is stationary, because airlines themselves, eastbound flights are often identical in duration as westbound flights. So that means that the Earth is stationary. It really, truly does. Oh, but I know. An airplane is traveling with the spin of the Earth prior to takeoff, so even if it takes off and accelerates west at hundreds of miles an hour, it's still traveling east at 1,000 miles an hour, just like it was before it took off, right? My goodness, man. Okay, but thanks for the comment anyway, Angel Setches. I hope that you look into this better, or more deeply. Oh, and the other thing, the Van Allen belts. Well, that remains to be seen. I've never been to the Van Allen belts. Neither have you, I would venture to guess. And so you cannot sit there and conjecture things as evidence, okay? Your conjecture is not evidence of anything except your incapacity or your inability to consider this topic as viable. Okay, only at the point when you consider flat Earth as a viable hypothesis, I'm not saying become a flat earther, I'm saying think about this. Only at that point where you make the conscious decision to think about this and maybe try to debunk the ball Earth theory, it's only at that point will you begin to get it. As long as you plug your ears and close your eyes and say la 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 to anything that comes up about flat Earth, you're never going to get it. And that's what they are counting on. They're counting on you not thinking about this. So hopefully, if anything else, what my mission is to plant seeds of truth with you guys so that maybe one day you'll actually look into it. Because you will find that once you do look into this with some degree of open-mindedness for flat Earth, some degree of skepticism for the globe, only then will you have an opportunity to get this. So I hope and pray that you do. And thanks again for the comment, Angel. Okay, Hoffman Tajabi. Lighthouses debunking the spinning ball Earth. Yep. Bridges and tunnels and railroads too. Yep. So Hoffman Tajabi says, you really expect to overthrow all of science with a dumb one-liner, which isn't even true? So Bates, 60 RMC, says, I live in the heart of the Canadian vast prairies, and on clear temperature days, I can see a 100-foot tall grain elevator from 20 miles away with high-power binoculars while standing on the shoulder of Highway 66. Oh, of Highway at 6'6", viewing elevation. On the temp days, there's barely any distortion or refraction. There should be 173 feet of curvature, yet I can see almost the whole 100-foot grain elevator. There's a video on YouTube titled, quote, and I don't see anything else there, so I can't see the rest of that. And here comes ignorance is not a virtue with their unwanted ad hominems, I'm sure.
Yeah, baloney. You can see exactly as expected on the globe. Of course, you can't see the bottom of the grain elevator, but you convince yourself otherwise. You really believe that the entire world's scientific community is lying?
No, dude, they're not lying. That's the thing. No, scientists are not liars. The scientists of the world were tricked into believing this nonsense since they were gullible little children, just like I was, just like you were, and they continue believing it. Okay, so no, they're not lying. They're not out to deceive anyone. They believe, no matter what, that the Earth is a spinning ball in outer space. And so any evidence to the contrary, they find explanations of, against that evidence. They apologize for the ball, rather than actually delving into this subject matter, and that is to say, to consider the possibility, if only for argument's sake, that the Earth might actually be flat and stationary. Okay, so what they are guilty of, these scientists you mentioned, they are guilty of, well, not being scientists. Because in order for a person to be a scientist, they must apply the scientific method to different hypotheses. If you don't like a hypothesis because of what you believe, or you fail to consider or refuse to consider a hypothesis because of your programming, you are no longer an objective scientist. You are more akin to a dogmatic religious zealot brainwashed by the cult of scientism, although not a witting liar. So that's a big distinction to make. So flat earthers are not calling scientists liars. We're saying that, well, they were deceived as children, and they are unwittingly perpetuating this deception. Okay, but I would not say they're guilty of anything but being brainwashed by this system. Okay, now, who set up this system? Why? What are their motivations? You can get into that, but it's not necessary to prove the point. The Earth doesn't have curvature. The Sun is local. The Earth is not in motion. There is no acceleration. The Earth is a fixed frame of reference because it is at rest. Okay, so thanks for the comment, Bates60RMC. Okay, so YouTube channel says Flattarge STFU. Okay, you're getting banned from this channel. Dog1, now he's taking people's money. Flat conference $200 to $400 a ticket. Well, just so you know, I had nothing to do with that. I did attend the conference. I had a great time. Met lots of lovely and wonderful people. It was an absolute blast. But I was paid nothing for that. Nothing at all. I was not paid for my time. you know, nothing. I didn't make any money on that at all. Okay? So, you know, and by the way, if you go and rent a venue as nice as the one that we had in Denver, it costs money. You know, Robbie Davidson, the guy that put on the conference, had lots of overhead, lots of expenses. And so, you know, if you want to attend any sort of conference or show or concert, it's going to cost money for the tickets. Okay? Now, I don't know what Robbie made off that, if he made anything. Maybe he broke even, but that's none of my business, and it's none of yours. People decided to buy those tickets because they wanted to attend. They agreed to the price, and they bought it. So that's their prerogative. So now you're dictating what people can and can't do with their own money? Give me a break, man. Dog1 says again, this is in response to the Nat Geo pwned hit piece, the sun, moon, planets, and stars inside the dome and not running into each other. I don't understand what that means. I don't get it. I'm sorry. Red Coyote Jam Garden says, I still have no explanation for why nonstop flights from Sydney to Santiago are so short in distance and time. They match the globe model, although other data matches the flat model. There is no flat Earth map that is consistent with the flights. I keep looking for one. You know, and I agree, Red Coyote Jam, I agree that there are some perceived problems with the azimuthal equidistant projection. But really, the perceived problem is just that, and I believe that it all stems from, this is my belief, so take it with a grain of salt, but I believe that the AE projection starts with a globe model, maps that out onto essentially a Mercator projection, and then takes that, like a cylindrical conformal projection, like the Mercator projection is, and then takes that cylindrical conformal projection and maps it onto the azimuthal equidistant projection. Okay, so there are inherent flaws in the AE projection. However, if you're trying to measure distances from one far southern point, say Santiago, to another far southern point, say to Sydney, that's not how that map is intended to operate. The AE projection is only intended to measure distances from the central point south to any other point, okay, but not east to west, okay? And so, like, let's say, for example, the 90 degrees south on the AE projection is represented by the greatest circle of the whole map, okay? Now, or let's say from Santiago to Sydney, that appears to be too long of a line for the actual distance or for the actual flight times. The thing is again, that line means nothing, okay? The map was never intended to measure east to west distances from far southern locations. So taking that line comprised between, or the curved line, line segment, arc, whatever, between Santiago and Sydney and saying this is too long for reality is tantamount to saying that the 90 degrees south on the Mercator projection is way too long. Because again, the 90 degrees south on the Mercator projection is supposedly a single point stretched across the entire map to infinity. Okay? So the equatorial line is the same length as the 90 degrees south line on the Mercator projection. Okay? So what you're doing would be tantamount to saying the 90 degrees south latitude is not 25,000 miles long as the equator is, and so the Mercator projection is a failed model. Right? Well, the Mercator projection is not a model. Okay? And globe earthers, and I'm not saying that you are, sir, but globe earthers will pick apart this very same flaw with the AE projection and yet fail to apply that flaw or fail to recognize that flaw with the Mercator projection. Okay? So again, the equator is 25,000 miles long, represented by a horizontal line across the center of the Mercator projection. The 90 degrees south is a single point, allegedly on the bottom of the sphere, that is represented by a line horizontal of the same distance at the bottom of the map. Okay? So if you have that sort of a problem with the AE projection, then you must by default have that same problem with the Mercator projection. The problem is, in both instances, you are misapplying the map. Okay? The AE projection was never intended to measure distances between far southern points. Okay? So hopefully that answers the question. And yes, I think that we do need a much better map. And really the only way that we're going to get that, I believe, is if we do large-scale, full-scale geodetic, geodesic surveying of not only the far southern land masses, but also the far southern oceans. Okay, because I do believe that they have the far southern land masses or road maps pretty damn accurate. Okay, but there's so much ocean out there, the vastness of the Pacific, the vastness of the South Atlantic, all those oceans. If there's errors in the overall map, they can tuck those errors and hide those errors away in the oceans. And really, whoever is going to go and map the oceans is not going to happen. Okay, so hopefully that helps to answer your question. And you know, we've seen lots of loved and precious flat earthers jump ship because of that very issue with the AE projection. Okay, so there are some inherent problems with the AE projection, or at least perceived problems, if you are misapplying what that map is supposed to be used for. And again, that map is supposed to be used for measuring distances from the center point south. So any direction to the outside edge is what it's measuring. Okay, but those long arcs in the far south, it really means nothing. Especially when you realize that I believe that the AE projection first takes a sphere model and maps that out on a flat surface. Okay, so it is my contention that the northern hemisphere in the AE projection is very accurate. The southern hemisphere, I think that's where the trickery is going on. And the fact of the matter is, it's very difficult to map thousands and thousands of miles of ocean. Okay, but if you do look back at the mariners who were trying to circumnavigate the far south, the Antarctic, they could never make their way all the way around of it. Okay, and so it's way too long for the globe. Okay, the distance around Antarctica, according to dudes that actually tried to circumnavigate the far south, according to them, there's way too much distance involved for the globe model. Okay, so the globe model has big problems with these guys, and that's why we don't learn much about them, I believe, in regular school. Okay, so here we go. Bubba Thierke says, and thanks for the comment, by the way, Red Coyote Jam Garden. Appreciate that. Bubba Thierke says,
it's truly remarkable that this fellow and his cohorts take issue with decades of empirical scientific research and evidence that clearly indicates that they have no clue what they're talking about.
And I would love to see if he will reference or cite one example, or just more unsubstantiated claims, more ad hominem, per the normal, when it comes to globetards.
They seem to be driven by paranoid delusional thinking that causes them to hold fast to a model that they can't possibly believe to be true.
No, nobody's holding fast to a model. The fact of the matter is, the Earth possesses no curvature, certainly not the inverse square curvature necessary to result in an overall sphere. The Earth is clearly and demonstrably at rest. Any child, anybody can attest to that. The Earth is a fixed frame of reference, and as we mentioned earlier, the only true fixed frame of reference is a static or stationary object. So no, we're not holding fast to a model, we're holding fast to the obvious, clear evidence that proves the Earth doesn't have curvature, and it's not in motion. That's it. That's it. The models can come and go. The models have issues. I have issues with the models. I don't even call the AE projection a model anymore. It isn't. It's a projection map. Okay, but for you to make this ad hominem attack that we're paranoid, delusional, holding fast to a model is completely unfounded and absurd, sir. So you say, it is a strange disorder that causes a person to convince himself of something that deep down inside he believes is false. Dude, what are you talking about? We were all raised to believe that the Earth is a spinning ball. I believed it my entire life. I was a big fan of infinite space theory and aliens and NASA and all of that. No, it is a strange disorder where a person refuses to consider an hypothesis that falls outside of their comfort zone. That is a strange disorder. And I guarantee you, if you simply put down the globe for argument's sake and just consider that the world might actually be flat and stationary, and go out into the world and try to find evidence for curvature, go out into the world, try and find evidence for axial rotation and orbital motion, you will find, staggeringly enough, that the Earth does not have curvature. It is not in motion, and therefore, by very definition, is the contrary to a spinning sphere, sir.
Deep down inside he believes to be false. Then he makes every effort to persuade very gullible others that they should only buy into the nonsense that he has talked himself into believing.
So you're calling all the subscribers to my channel and all the flat earthers out there basically gullible, brainless morons is basically what you're saying, right, in so many words. No, flat earthers, as a rule, are typically very intelligent, very open-minded, and unfortunately it is the globe earthers who are incapable of thinking outside of the box enough to at least humor an idea or humor a hypothesis for argument's sake. And again, that is the very crux of the scientific method. Okay? If you refuse to consider hypothesis, you are the opposite of a scientist. Okay? I'm just saying. So thanks for the comment, Bubba Thierke. I would say that you are very misguided and you're misunderstanding this whole thing. We are flat earthers because the earth is flat and stationary. Okay, it has nothing to do with models, it has nothing to do with paranoid delusions or convincing gullible people of anything. This has to do with, well, geometry and physics. Okay, geometry means measure the earth. Geometry, measure the earth. Physics is the study of bodies in motion. So simple geometry, simple physics dictates and proves conclusively, without any shadow of a doubt at all, that the earth is flat and stationary. That's it. There's nothing more to it. You know, we don't have to explain what the sun and moon are, how things operate in flat earth theory. There's no need for that conjecture to prove the lack of curvature. There's no need for conjecture to prove the lack of motion of the earth. Okay, it's very simple. And I challenge you to find evidence for earth motion and earth curvature. Okay? And, you know, just take a look at this picture here, 273 miles, no curvature, the mountain range is visible over 273 miles. Shouldn't happen on a ball. Okay? Okay, John Bucock says, you may have observed something, but you surely didn't understand what you were seeing. And if the earth is flat, what causes eclipses? Okay, so, again, ad hominem attack, unsubstantiated claim, science, right? Science at its fundamental core. No. If the earth is flat, what causes solar eclipses? The moon is apparently transiting the sun according to certain specific observers on earth. In the ball earth theory, if the moon transits the sun, it should be ubiquitous. It should be visible from everywhere. But again, the little pinpointer shadow of the moon is only visible for certain people on the ball, which makes absolutely no sense to the scale, where you're a little teeny tiny observer on this giant ball. The moon is 250,000 miles away, the sun is 93 million miles away, and yet the eclipses, the total solar eclipses, are only visible for a small portion of people on the globe. Makes no sense. The reason why eclipses are only visible for a small portion of people on the world is because the sun and moon are local. You know, if you've got a light right here and an obstructing object here, you're only going to get the shadow of that object for a small, limited number of people. But if you've got the light 90 million miles away and the obstructing object, the moon, 250,000 miles away, that shadow should be, that should blot out the sun for everybody on Earth. Okay? And the shadow should be more than 50 or 60 miles in diameter normally. Okay? So, you know, John Bucock, unsubstantiated claims, ad hominem attacks, do nothing for this argument. It only proves that you have not looked into this. You are operating from a position of ignorance. You refuse to look at the evidence that we've been pointing to. And that, again, is the opposite of science. Okay? Thanks for the comment. Okay, K-May. K-May says, everything starts with proving the Earth does not rotate, and that really seems to be very realistically true. Thank you. Well said. It is very obvious. Like, once you get this, there isn't a doubt in my mind. Like this other guy says, oh, I'm tricking gullible people. No, because of my beliefs. No, this isn't about beliefs. There is not even a shadow of doubt in my mind that the Earth is stationary. There is not a shadow of doubt in my mind that the Earth is flat. It doesn't have curvature. And so, you know, it's a very clear point. This is obvious. This is something that, you know, in my opinion, doesn't even need all that much evidence to prove. The reason that it seems that Flat Earth needs a lot of evidence to prove is because of the mind control programming, the conditioning that we were all subjective to as gullible little kids. And it's sad, but it's true, as Metallica said. So thanks for the comment, K-May. Michael Davino says, Sun is less than 93 miles high. 93 million. The projection, that is, he says. Michael Davino says, because you say so, and throw a bunch of infinital emojis. Good grief. I'm not sure if I said 93 miles high. Maybe I misspoke. But of course, according to the Ball Earth theory, the Sun is 93 million miles away. According to Flat Earth triangulation upon the Sun, it appears to be about 4,000 miles in altitude, although I do not concur with that number because it doesn't take into account all of the different unknown variables in the refraction index. And that could be from magnetic fields, could be from the atmosphere, different layers of temperature and different layers of density gradients in the atmosphere. There's just so much refraction going on until we have the exact index for that specific point on that day. When you're making these solar observations, you're not going to be able to get a true distance to the Sun. Okay? But according to, the Pythagorean trigonometry, the Sun is about 3,900 miles up. And in fact, the apparent distance to the Sun using this triangulation method is very close to the alleged radius of the Earth. So there does appear to be some relationship there with how they've tricked us into believing the ball, that the distance to the Sun is very close to that ball's radius. It is an interesting point, and I think that I think there's something to be gleaned there that we have not yet figured out. So keep an eye on that. So Pimptronic says,
what the F are you on about? Disliked.
See, it is that exact refusal to consider this hypothesis that the status quo counts on. As long as everybody has Pimptronic's attitude to this topic, then they're A-okay. But when people start looking into this and humoring the hypothesis, or really try to debunk Flat Earth, and not just regurgitate the list of things that are on popularscience.com, don't just regurgitate the list of things that the astronauts tell you. Actually look into this, try to debunk the valid arguments for Flat Earth, try to debunk the valid arguments against the Ball Earth, and you will find every single time that Flat Earth wins. I mean, it is very clear and obvious to somebody who's looked into this long enough, who has removed themselves from the mind control programming, that this is an obvious, self-evident fact that the Earth is in fact stationary and flat. And unfortunately, it is difficult to get through to people who just simply refuse to look into it. I mean, how do you plan to better yourself or broaden your horizons if you absolutely refuse to look at alternative hypothesis, right? K-May says, always well presented with factual, undeniable information. Thanks. Well, I appreciate that, K-May. That means a lot to me. Michael Rodriguez says, at 3912, he says, here's your curvature, yet you can still see the entire landscape behind the supposed curvature. I know, right? Like, that's Tim Osmond's MO. Like, he relies on people that just listen to what he says, fail to consider what he's saying, and just agree with him. That's what he's counting on. Because he made absolutely no point against the proof whatsoever. He just argued against it, said that I don't know what I'm talking about. It said, here, look, see, this proves the Earth's a globe. Haha. End of argument. It is really, it's comical, in my opinion. So thanks for the comment, Michael Rodriguez. Thanks for the comment, Michael Rodriguez. Tiebreaker says,
can't believe Nat Geo wasted time and money on ridiculous flat earthers.
Yeah, well, you can call it ridiculous, but does that add curvature to the Earth? Does that add axial rotation or orbital velocities to the Earth? No, it doesn't. Sorry. Now, let's keep in mind that corporations spend tens of millions of dollars on 30-second long or 1-minute long advertisement slots on, say, the Super Bowl. Now, do you think that these corporations who have an obligation to turn a profit are just throwing away dozens of millions of dollars for 30 seconds on the air on the Super Bowl, just willy-nilly for no real strategic purpose? Or do you think that perhaps there is some benefit to these corporations by broadcasting on the television? And so, in parallel to that, National Geographic is a worldwide syndication, worldwide known publication, and publisher of all sorts of content. And apparently, they have found Flat Earth interesting enough, at least, to do this piece. Now, of course, their research was deplorable at the best of times, and basically all they did was show just exactly how ignorant they are to the actual proofs of the flat earth and just how subservient they are to the globe earth theory. That is the sad thing about this particular truth, is that even when you tell people that the earth is flat and stationary and show them conclusive evidence, they simply will not believe you, and they will deem you to be either mad or a fool. Only upon skeptical examination of the flat earth scenario, as well as skeptical and logical re-examination of the globe earth theory, only then does one have a chance, even a chance, to begin to understand the truth. Tanner Chop says, how the hell did this go from 90 plus dislikes to 60? Because YouTube blackballs me, okay? I'm not bragging, but I have 30,000 subscribers on my channel, and when I put out a video, very rarely do they get more than 5 or 10,000 views. A couple years ago, I could put out a video, and if it was decent, it would get 100,000 views. Anymore, even my own subscriber base doesn't get a chance to see my videos because it's not showing up in their feeds, or YouTube is just simply not posting those views, not reporting those views. And so in terms of the likes and dislikes doing funky things, it makes a lot of sense to me that YouTube is not being forthright with how they're handling flat earth videos. I mean, it is obvious to anyone who's been YouTubing long enough. I started YouTubing in 2015, I believe. Yeah, 2015. It is now 2019, and I've seen YouTube change from day to night, okay, in terms of how videos are handled, of how your subscribers get a chance to see your videos, of how videos are posted. You know, if you YouTube or Google search Flat Earth right now, you will not find anything but Flat Earth debunking videos, which is telling. YouTube is trying to put the genie back in the bottle. They're trying to put the cat back in the bag on this topic, and frankly, I think they're failing miserably, but you know, they're doing whatever they can to make this topic appear less popular and less genuine than it actually is. So it does make some sense to me that you would see funky things going on with the likes and dislikes. Not surprised at all, you know. Gilby says Globetards becoming flatties. Yeah, maybe. Maybe I convinced them at mid-show, right? I don't know. Maybe not. But, you know, that video in particular was the one where I was responding to Tim Osmonds' email, and he admittedly has hundreds of sock puppet accounts that he can just log in, dislike, log out, log in, dislike, log into another one, dislike. And so, you know, whatever. I don't really look at the likes and dislikes, honestly. But, you know, not surprised. Julie Schaefer says, why don't you flat earthers go and take a picture, or better yet, a video of this towering ice wall you believe surrounds us? That would be easy enough, right? Okay, sure, that's easy enough. Just pop into Antarctica on your way to work tomorrow, right? Oh, that's right, you can't bring or store fuel past the 60 degrees south, so you're going to have to walk to Antarctica on your way to work tomorrow because, well, you clearly can't drive. If you've got an ice-breaking vessel, you got to do it with no fuel. Let's not forget you have to get permission from the Antarctic Treaty Board, from all their signing members. Yeah, it's not going to happen. You can go to Antarctica, and yeah, there appears to be an ice wall. Just look at Admiral Richard Byrd's documentary, The Flight Beyond Imagination, where Operation High Jump, they jumped over the ice wall to explore the Antarctic. And quoting, or paraphrasing Admiral Byrd here, he said that south of Little America, so in the Ball Earth theory, you've got pie wedges of Antarctica, and Little America is one of these pie wedges. South of the South Pole from Little America, there's a continental landmass larger than the Americas. Now, I don't know if you realize this, but that doesn't fit on a globe. So the one person who was a Freemason, you know, and a military man, Admiral Byrd, the one person who did this, scaled the ice wall and flew beyond the South Pole from Little America, reports that there is more land out there, just as stated in the Iron Republic, as mentioned earlier in this recording. So, you know, no, we can't just pop into Antarctica on foot and take a picture of the ice wall, but there is lots of footage of it. Just YouTube search Richard Byrd, Admiral Richard E. Byrd, Operation High Jump, and there's an entire contemporaneous documentary about the thing. It's very interesting. Okay, and you know, another thing that Byrd mentioned that I think is an interesting point, when he went down there, their surveys gleaned that there was lots of natural resources to be had in Antarctica. Okay, and he predicted that Antarctica would become very busy with corporate activity and mining and extracting all of the wealth, abundant resources from Antarctica that the growing world needs. You know, we need coal, we need oil, we need gold, all the stuff that you can find in mountain ranges all over the world, heavily concentrated in the Antarctic. So what Richard Byrd predicted, though, was that lots of corporate activity down there in the coming decades, and what we got instead was the exact opposite of that. So instead, we got the Antarctic Treaty, which essentially prevents corporate activity and prevents people from going down there, extracting the resources from Antarctica. And this is through all of the oil crises, the oil spills, the energy crises. We're strip mining entire beautiful mountain ranges that will never come back. We're fracking in our own backyards for natural gas. You know, we're destroying our very own ecosystem, destroying the rainforests, and yet Antarctica remains allegedly pristine and untapped, in spite of the wealth of resources down there. Now, does that make any sense to you in the capitalist corporate society that we find ourselves in? It doesn't make any sense to me, unless you realize that they are hiding stuff in the Antarctic. Thank you for the comment, Tanner Chop and Gil B. Julie Schaefer, thank you for the comment. So AP responded to Julie Schaefer, every picture of the supposed globe is CGI. There are no real photos. Should be easy enough to do by 2019, right? Yeah, indeed. They're all composite images, even according to NASA. They've got allegedly the blue marble taken back in the late 60s, early 70s. Although, you know, look at the funny thing happened on the way to the moon. Bart Sibrel did an excellent job of proving that that was fakery done, shooting through the window with a cutout, you know, like a translucent cutout in the window that made it look like it was the planet Earth, when in fact it was just the blue sky through the window. So, yeah, the globe and NASA just don't have a leg to stand on, you guys. I mean, they have absolutely been shown to be completely full of it and absolutely wrong. Edgelord von Krinberg responded to AP, says, Julie Schaefer, they won't because they believe Navy vessels from all seafaring nations are guarding the ice wall. That's not true. It's not true at all. They don't have to do that. There's only 3 really viable starting points to go to the Antarctic. That would be the southern tip of South America, Australia, and the southern tip of Africa. Okay, that's a pretty easy journey from any one of those 3 points to the Antarctic. So as long as they guard those 3 general areas well enough, I don't think anyone's going to go out to the middle of the Pacific and then go down to the Antarctic. They're going to start, you know, in Venezuela or the South Horn of Africa or maybe Tasmania. What's up, Marin? Marin out there in Tasmania. Love her to death. I hope everything's going well for you, sweetie. But yeah, anyway, no, we don't say that they're guarding the entire ice wall. You know, we don't even know that there is an ice wall everywhere. I mean, that's a lot of conjecture. I've never been to the ice wall. I've never been all the way around the Antarctic, and neither have any of you, I assure you. DeCardio Steve Green says, Andrew Parrott, there are hundreds of thousands of images of Earth, all showing it to be a globe. There isn't a single photo showing Earth as a giant frisbee, and yet you all moan about CGI demanding to see real pictures. You don't see the hypocrisy in that. Well, here's the thing, dude. We don't have NASA promoting flat Earth. The Ball Earth does have NASA promoting it, and they are faking pictures. Okay, look at the relative size of the United States in this picture and that picture. The globe's the same size, but the United States apparently shrinks and grows depending on what mood it's in that year, I suppose, right? And by the way, this whole idea of a giant frisbee is absurd. Okay, infinite space and all of its trappings go right out the window with flat Earth. The Earth is the physical plane of reality. The stars are luminaries above us, okay? But we're not a disk flying around in space, okay? That's absurd. No flat earther worth their salt purports that, okay? Maybe you've got entities like the Flat Earth Society putting out misinformation about the frisbee disk Earth flying around in space, but that's a bunch of nonsense, okay? So no, there is no hypocrisy in that, and if we were stealing $50 million a day from taxpayers in order to produce fake pictures of frisbee Earth, then there would be hypocrisy in that. Okay, but that's not what's happening. That's what NASA's doing for the globe. Do you see the difference? I hope you do. So VT says, not easier possible. What are you doing here? VT says, why don't they release Captain Cook's logs if they were burned 100+ years ago? Julie Schaefer says, so do you think every pilot in the world is in on it? Absolutely not, Julie Schaefer. Pilots believe that the Earth is a spinning ball, just like scientists, just like tennis players, just like NASA employees. Since they were gullible toddlers, we were all ubiquitously, unanimously tricked into believing this lie. Then we go on and teach the lie, not as witting participants in the deception, but as unwitting patsies in perpetuating this deception. Okay, so no, pilots have flown above and around a flat and motionless Earth for thousands of hours oftentimes, and there are plenty of flat earthers who are pilots. Bob Nodell, one of the Globebusters, is a pilot. Okay, so no, pilots aren't in on this. They're just as deceived as everyone else. But pilots do have a little bit of an easier time coming to terms with flat Earth, I think, because, you know, they have so much experience flying in moving crafts above and around the stationary plane Earth. Okay, so that's just, I mean, that's the conclusions that globe earthers jump to. They think that we're saying that teachers are liars, scientists are liars, pilots are liars. No, that we were all deceived by this deception when we were very young. And it is difficult to overcome that deception, especially because when you go and tell people, look, the Earth's flat and stationary, they don't believe you anyway. It is a perfect deception. And, you know, lending credence to the Bible, the Bible warned us of this. Look out for this great deception that will fool the entire world, even the very elect, if such a thing were possible. Now, how would the writers of the Bible have known that 2,000 years ago? Long before the ball Earth theory was even, you know, widely accepted. Okay? So thanks for the comments, guys. Ignorance is not a virtue says, images of the ice wall are not needed. There is a video somewhere of a flat earther claiming they spoke to someone who saw it, so that's all that's needed in a flat earth land. Now let's just roll a clip of Admiral Byrd's Flight Beyond Imagination. Sergio Amata says, flat it is. Yeah, thanks for the comment, Sergio. Ray Whittington says, they're still trying to use the disappearing boat over the horizon school children's fairy tale on grown adults who can test this for themselves. How grossly they underestimate people. Agreed. Good point. I'm so tired of hearing that ships over the horizon thing. And you've even got Tim Osmond using different versions of it with buildings and lighthouses and mountains. And, you know, we understand that it's perspective and a bit of refraction. The angular size limit of our eyes is finite. So once an object gets out to the horizon, the angular size of that object becomes indistinguishable from the horizon itself. You've also got the masking band of the atmosphere, heat waves and such that do perturb the light from objects near the ground. And so there are a number of factors that go into this illusion, but that's all that it is an illusion. Show no fear, Ewok. Love it. Yeah, that's my BB. Don't trust anyone who isn't an animal lover. Amen. I have an English Springer Spaniel. That was my first dog, Sally. English Springer Spaniel. Wakes me up every single morning on at 5 a.m. on the dot for our morning run. Aw, I love English Springer Spaniels. I really do. He's not as cute as your little buddy, but he's as loyal as a dog can be, and I love him to bits. I've had a dog by my side all my life. Wouldn't be without one. Agreed. I love my baby. She really is like one of the sweetest things ever. And Sally, my English Springer Spaniel, was just the sweetest dog in the world. Beautiful dogs, easy to get along with, very trainable, smart dogs. You know, love them. Just showed the Ewok to the missus. Okay, Bad Dream 7777 says, brother, you got to see what my city did last week. Laughing my ass off. I was like, did I just murder someone in my sleep? Nope, just a smart water meter. Let's see.
Not at all. All right.
You know, maybe we don't want to bathe our bodies in harmful RF waves all the time. You know, maybe we want to mitigate that a bit if we can. No, we're not allowed to stop corporations from pumping our bodies with harmful RF waves, right?
Looks like the water department has some paperwork they need to go over with you.
Okay.
Looks like the water department has some paperwork they need to go over with you.
Okay.
And they have to change the meter out. So we're just gonna hang out.
Yeah, I don't want the smart meter. So.
Okay. Well,
yeah.
I don't think that's up to you at this point. You've got
Well,
a good job.
I don't want the smart meter.
Okay, here's the paperwork for what we're doing and the program that we're doing.
Yeah, I mean that's fine, but I don't want it. So
Well,
you do what you have to do.
You gotta put it in. It is almost a $400 meter, so if it gets damaged and all that, it'll be put on the bill. So
That's not my issue. I didn't have an issue.
Where's the meter at?
He went to Summersville.
Yes, sir. What year did you graduate?
92, I think.
Okay, you're about 5 years behind me then.
Yeah. Rocky, I knew.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah, he graduated, what, 91, I think?
Yeah, right before me.
What's your name, man?
Brad.
Which last name, Brad?
I don't answer questions.
That's fine. You look familiar. I just see if I placed you.
You're good.
You been to the old school lately?
No, I haven't been out there. I heard that they did a lot of good stuff out there.
Man. Yeah, remember we had the old wood floor and all that junk?
Oh yeah.
They definitely switched that up a lot.
Oh yeah. I saw that they did. I did drive by. I seen that they did some work, but
The hallways we used to have to sit in are all redone now, and they got a big old nice gymnasium. And
I seen that.
it's really
Yeah, I seen that. Yeah, I wanted to find Miss Lesby. I haven't got to see her in a while.
You know what? I think she is maybe. Last I knew, she was running as superintendent or principal down at either Opdyke or Bellwright.
That's what I had heard. That's what I had heard.
So that's been 5 years ago. That's probably 10 years ago. But I think she's still around. I still see some of her stuff on Facebook and all that.
Oh yeah. You do know this is against my rights, right? You're right.
Well, I think the city should take this as their property. And
It isn't their property. That's on my property.
well,
8 foot from the center line is the public easement, is the utilities easement. That's way past that.
we're just down here maintaining. Did you apparently made some threats against the city employees, so just to make sure.
How did I make threats?
I don't know, man. We're just down here standing by.
Oh my good. See? You see what happens? This is why I record.
That's fine.
This is 100% why I record. Wow.
That's why we record too, disclose and got all that stuff.
Oh yeah. And I'm glad you guys got body cam. She doesn't. Do you have a body cam?
No,
Is it running?
we don't have body cams.
Okay. You guys need body cams.
No, we really
100%.
Yeah, I agree, but the state laws are so bad on those things that it puts the departments in a really bad position on different things.
Transparency makes
No,
you look bad?
No.
I'm just saying, that just seems kind of crazy to me.
No, so like now we're talking to you.
Yeah.
Do I have to give you an audible notice that you've been recorded? Well, I don't. But
Yeah.
if your wife comes out, we got to stop what we're doing. I have to tell her that if her kid comes out.
But it's a public situation. You're in public. You have every right to film. Just like I have every right to film on private property. If I was on the sidewalk, I'd have every reason to be able to film anything I could see.
But they have special laws for the police officers that are
Oh, well.
banned for general citizens.
Yeah, I don't see that happening, but yeah.
It makes it, storage stuff and redaction issues. They really took what's a good thing by having body cameras. I think it's a great thing.
I do too.
They made it where departments I went to a training class over in Belleville a while back, and it was all administrators. And out of that group, there were 31 different departments there. There was one department that had body cameras.
Oh.
And it was related to body cameras, social media, stuff like that.
Right.
And everybody cited the laws in Illinois why they don't have body cameras.
Right.
Because it's so, it can really put a huge burden, not on the reporting stuff, but on the paperwork end of it.
I understand that. I could see that. But transparency is worth any amount of paperwork. 100%.
99% of the time, it's going to clear. I have no confidence, or I've got total confidence it's going to clear the officers and say they did the exact right thing, and that's what you're seeing. But the problem is you literally run a department in the ground by people looking for information, trying to get that.
I understand that. I mean, and the First Amendment auditors are making a stand in the situation that all transparency is 100%. That it doesn't matter. You know what I mean? That you guys have to be held accountable.
Yep. And like I say, I firmly believe that 99% of the time the officers are totally right, and it clears it up and it makes it easier for us. And we've had instances where, a lot of instances, people come up, oh, this happened, I'm being harassed, and we look at the video and it's like, very clearly, that's not what happened.
That's why I do this.
No, that's basically we tell our officers nowadays, we always expect we're being recorded no matter what, as long as you act like that.
Exactly. That's 100%.
Okay, so basically what's going on here is they're forcing this man, Bad Dream Quadruple 7, to put the smart water meter on his house. And, I think it should be our prerogative to determine whether or not we want these potentially dangerous RF waves in that close a proximity to our house. But, to get the police out to force him to do that, I mean, wow, this country is going down the tube, I'm telling you. So back to it. Wow, BS Funk 44 says, you are all complete effing morons. Go F yourselves, you idiots. Well, that is a scientific argument for the globe if I've ever heard one, ain't it? Okay, you're banned from the channel. And by the way, thanks for the comment and video post, Bad Dream. That's crazy, man. I'm glad you got that, though. Okay, so Gina Farrell says, I don't understand how some people actually believe we live upside down on a ball, but once we're upside down, we are right side up. Wake up, we are not on a scientifically and physically impossible ball. Flat Earth proof 1, hands down again. Fake pictures and equations on paper is only proof of the ball. Agreed. Well said, Gina. Totally agreed. Yep. Panicos of Grace says, however, Gina Farrell, we don't believe we are upside down. You were told it like that, so you wouldn't look into it properly. Not sure where they're going with that. I don't know what to say. Dircardo St. Evergreen says,
scientifically impossible. The second you claim to be a flat earther, it's a given that you know absolutely nothing about science.
Now here's the thing. Science is a method to discern the truth. So knowing anything about science is irrelevant. Oh, what you're saying is she doesn't believe the scientism paradigm as you do, as you were taught to, just like all the other good globetards, right? So just more ad hominem, non-arguments, zero proof of a spinning ball Earth, and yet they sit on their high horse because it is socially not acceptable to proclaim that the Earth is clearly and obviously not a spinning ball. So just had a little fun with this, you guys. I'm going to wrap this up now. Thanks for watching. And if you'd like to support this channel and help me to continue making Flat Earth videos, I sure could use your help. For a one-time contribution, you can go to www.paypal.me/TheMorgile. Again, that's www.paypal.me/TheMorgile. Or for a recurring contribution through Patreon, you can go to www.patreon.com/TheMorgile. So thanks again for watching, you guys. Love y'all. God bless you guys, and as always, spread the word, spread the world, and peace out.
Be safe. I promise I'm not a bad guy.
Some of them that changed, they had better water pressure after the fact.
That's interesting. See, I've heard all. Yeah, I've heard some of the war stories, and I've heard the goods. The water, like if there's a problem with the water, they know immediately. I think that's an interesting situation, so you don't lose a whole bunch on your bill. That's neat.
Also, if you're losing water at your house, they can tell you that.
Right,
so you know if
right,
you get a leak and
right. Somebody was joking and said that you guys will know how many flushes we do.
The earth shake. Make the earth shake. Rock on. Make the earth shake. Make the earth shake.